Fixing them! Ah, yeah, I've got a new.
Who's the star of this one?
What? I zoomed in on Huey there.
The rest is in...
Big zoom for that one.
Practice it.
Big imagination. Come on. Wait a minute, I'll wheel ahead of Jimmy and try to steer him up the path. You fancy this? I'll steer him, wait.
That'll do. Oh! We're in the religion together.
Where are they?
Just the other side of the street.
Oh, I see them.
You look a picture of health and inspiration, Jimmy.
Oh. Oh, Christ.
Oh,
Now, bunny looking sight, eh?
I better take him here. Oh, fuck! Wait till you see tell Peter about this cloud inversion. I see her. Aye.
Is that the most
Yourself.
two spots in it?
Help yourself as usual, just...
You think if you had to take this and gas for it, you could send it to Wickeside for an advert?
Oh, aye.
Somebody planning, yeah. Nobody's in the crowd, see? See Blarden coming through there again, eh?
Oh, destiny. Nick Burke, how you doing?
That's what's wrong.
There was mist all over the whole of the track, so it was spectacular.
This is Glencoe, one of the most spectacular mountain regions of Scotland, created by a great volcanic upheaval and sculpted by the ice.
I am a Gian. The name MacDonald echoes still within the hearts of Highland men. My restless soul will never sleep. I am a Gian.
Glencoe is a playground for hill walkers and mountaineers and comes under the care of the National Trust for Scotland. It is also the haunt of the golden eagle. An eagle's eye view of the Devil's Staircase, constructed by the government after the 1745 rebellion to improve communications and help pacify the Highlands. Ossian was the son of Fingal, leader of the semi-legendary Fiann, Celtic heroes of the 3rd century. It was claimed that Ossian was born in Glencoe. Ossian's Cave, a place of drips and rising damp. In 1868, the first recorded rock climb in Glencoe was made up to the cave by a shepherd, Nicol Marcus. His great-great-grandson is a member of the Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team. MacIan, the elderly chief of the MacDonalds, was one of those killed in the massacre of 1692. He was buried here on Eilin Munday, the MacDonald burial isle on Loch Leven. On the south side of the glen is Stob Corrinan Lochan, a favourite peak for winter mountaineers. Here are the ruins of MacIan's summer home. He was murdered either here or at his house in Glencoe village during the massacre. Sheep farming is still part and parcel of life in the glen. This is a Treorton farm. The shepherds who know the easy routes down off the mountains use this knowledge as members of the Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team. These are black-faced sheep, hardy individuals that can survive the snows of a Highland winter. Here on Gearanach, 2 girls tackle a relatively easy climb. The rock is rhyolite, which is almost perfect for climbing. In Glencoe, the summer months offer hill walking and rock climbing, and in winter, ice climbing and skiing. It is a glen for all seasons. This mountain, Gearanach, is the middle peak of the Three Sisters, the 3 prominent mountains on the south side of the glen. Over 1,500 feet below is the Glencoe Road. Many of these ridges and rock faces were first scaled over 80 years ago, and they all have individual names and grades of difficulty. These climbs on Buchalettif Moor are equally popular with mountaineers in winter. Each year, thousands of visitors go through Glencoe. When Charles Dickens passed through the glen in 1841, he said that there were such haunts here as you might imagine yourself wandering in the very height and madness of a fever. It was also written that the glen was accessible only to the eagle and his feathered subjects.
Yet still my lonely spirit soars amid the mountains and the glen, from my ancestral burial ground. I am a Kian. The name MacDonald echoes still within the hearts of Highland men. My restless soul will never sleep. I am a Kian. The royal stag stands proudly on the hill, falling prey to man, his mortal foe. Some men know not of dignity or pride, and strike with no respect the deadly blow. Yet still my lonely spirit soars amid the mountains and the glen, from my ancestral burial ground. I am a Kian. The name MacDonald echoes still within the hearts of Highland men. My restless soul will never sleep. I am a Kian. The east is flanked by bouquet-letted moor. At south the highest Bidian is here. Of treachery no warning will they give, but from Signal Rock betrayal sounded clear. Yet still
According to legend, it was from Signal Rock that a fire, or some say a piper, gave the signal for the massacre. Glencoe has a bloody history, and on the 13th of February 1692, the massacre took place. This is a memorial to the MacDonald chief. Government troops under the command of Captain Robert Campbell, who were billeted with the Glencoe MacDonalds, turned on their hosts and murdered about 38 of them. Many others perished attempting to escape during a blizzard. This loch was created by Lord Strathcona of the Hudson Bay Company. When he was in Canada, Strathcona married a Red Indian chief's daughter and landscaped this area to remind his bride of her Canadian homeland. Glencoe is a place of changing moods and is equally fascinating in rain, snow or mist. This is the top of Ambotach, the Old Man, the easterly peak of the Anuhigach, which is the narrowest ridge on the British mainland. Below, in the depths of the glen, is Loch Triachtan. Some 300 million years ago, the Glencoe cauldron subsidence occurred. It was as if an enormous piston descended, weakened by a ring fault up which magma or molten rock was squeezed. This cooled as a dike of granite. Later, huge glaciers spilled out of what is now known as the Moor of Rannoch to excavate the glen. Today, on top of this ridge, granite boulders can be seen, which were carried to the crest by the ice. This is one of the finest ridge walks in the British Isles. It is not for the inexperienced, however, and care must be taken. It is also dangerous to try to descend before you reach the last peak. This could be mistaken for the Great Wall of China. Glencoe has one of the busiest mountain rescue teams in Scotland, and winter rescues, especially those involving avalanches, can be particularly hazardous. Here the team is called out to Gearanach, just round from where the girls were climbing, and as usual, an RAF helicopter has been requested. The team sets off immediately they're alerted. It is a carefully coordinated operation between the team, police and the RAF search and rescue helicopters. There are about 20 volunteers in the team. Like the shepherds, they live in the glen or close by, and they can be called out at any time of the day or night. The route today takes them towards the Lost Valley. Years ago, a great rockfall blocked the entrance to this corrie, and it was here that the MacDonalds of Glencoe hid stolen cattle. Cattle stealing, or reaving in those days, was a national sport. Corrigal is the Gaelic name for the valley, and it means corrie of the capture. Above the Rannoch Moor, an RAF search and rescue helicopter is en route to Glencoe, its flight path close to the top of the White Corrie's chairlift. This aircraft is a twin-engined Wessex. It has come from its base at Lucas and Fife to reach Glencoe in 43 minutes from when it was first scrambled. The large aircraft is dwarfed by Buchletiv Moor, the idyllic mountain at the east end of the glen. The helicopter crew are now in radio contact with Glencoe Mountain Rescue Team, who have reached the scene of the accident. The rescue team have ignited a smoke flare to pinpoint their position. The winchman has fired a very pistol smoke to allow the pilot to determine the precise wind direction. A special alloy stretcher is lowered to the casualty. Below, the rescue team keeps clear of the helicopter downwash. These search and rescue air crew are on 24-hour standby, and a large percentage of the rescues are at night, often in severe weather conditions. The winch wire is almost 300 feet long. This is a short lift and a simple operation. With the patient safely aboard, the helicopter sets off for Fort William Hospital. 2,000 feet below is the floor of Glencoe. The Wessex now skirts the edge of the Anahiga Ridge. Beyond the sharp crest is the Marmore Range to the north of Loch Leven. The Wessex descends as it nears Loch Leven. Below is the burial arm, the last resting place of the MacDonalds of Glencoe.
My lonely spirit soars amid the mountains and the land from my ancestral burial ground. I am a
Catherine d'Estivelle has been climbing since she was a schoolgirl. Now she's 28 and one of the best rock climbers in the world. This time she's in Africa, getting some local advice for a new climb.
Il demande si toutefois vous n'avez pas grimpé.
J'ai un petit peu grimpé ce matin.
She's a freestyle climber, one who climbs solo and without ropes.
Ah oui, nous faisons des cordes.
Et ça vous sert à quoi ces cordes-là?
Ça sert à attacher les animaux et en plus pour...
These Dogon tribesmen can't believe that tomorrow she'll attempt to climb their steepest cliff without using any ropes.
C'est des fibres de baobab.
C'est baobab.
Oui, on les fait sucer.
They're saying that if she should have a fit of sanity and change her mind, then she's welcome to use one of their splendid ropes.
Maintenant, on les met dans l'eau. Après, on fait les cordes.
Les cordes, elles sont pas plus grosses que ça quand vous montez.
Si, si.
The Dogons scale the cliff by rope as a matter of course, but the notion that someone would choose to climb it using only hands and feet strikes them at the least as perverse. This is the western edge of the Sahara. Above the village, the Bandiagara cliffs rise to a rock plateau that stretches for 200 miles. Catherine, with an escort of Dogon women, plans to make her freestyle ascent at the most difficult point. It's market day and promising to become a carnival. Everyone's turned up in anticipation of the amazing sideshow to be staged by this strange white woman. The man in the saffron robe accompanying Catherine to her starting point is a witch doctor who's modernized. Under his robe, he's got a jazz trumpet. He's going to blow a magic cadenza or two to bless her on her way.
Bon, maintenant, je vais te jouer ma trompette pour vous. Allons-y.
For the next 300 feet or so, Catherine's life will, quite literally, hang on the strength of her fingers and the sureness of her foothold. She uses no climbing aids of any kind, just a bag of chalk to dry the sweat on her palms and improve her grip on the rock. She tried climbing with a team, but found she preferred going solo. She hates the idea of being roped to someone else. She gets nervous, she says, when she has to depend on others. Catherine began rock climbing in the forests of northern France when she was 14, and then graduated to the French and Italian Alps. This rocky plateau was once the kingdom of the Telem pygmies. They scratched a precarious existence amongst the crags and crevasses. They chose this perilous high life to escape their aggressive and bigger neighbors. But by the 12th century, even the pygmies had abandoned this barren rockscape. Catherine is rated one of the fastest freestyle climbers in the world, men included. She's won speed climbing contests all over Europe. And now the lure of a new challenge in West Africa, and a small inducement from a filmmaker, has brought her to this rock face on the Bandiagara cliffs. This is one of the ancient burial chambers of the Telem pygmies, although some of the skeletons, she notes, are more recent than that. The sort of place for a failed freestyle climber, perhaps. But she's not at the top yet. The last pitch to the summit is the most dangerous stretch of all. Back at ground level, the celebration party has already started. The The Dogon women are honouring Catherine as a great new heroine. After all, she's just done what none of their menfolk could do. Catherine d'Estivelle, down from the golden cliffs of Mali. I find it hard to believe that any human being could accomplish what we've just seen her do. I find I get such inspiration for everyday life from just seeing that kind of perfection. Our next film is pretty inspiring too. It contains some of the best high-altitude filming I've seen. To film up there on the very edge of survival when you're nearly dead, well, I think I'd find myself saying, let's throw that bloody camera away and just concentrate on staying alive.
I've just moved up a couple of feet to have a look at the view. It's quite incredible. We're actually at the notch. Now let me show you the view.
In the summer of 1986, Tim McCartney-Snape captures on film the fearful elation of Himalayan mountaineering. The footage is rough, but it's real. Tim and his companions, Australians and Americans, are about 25,000 feet above sea level, still more than 1,000 feet below the summit of Gasherbron 4, a mountain many consider harder to climb than nearby Everest. Dozens have stood on the summit of Everest, McCartney-Snape among them. Only one expedition has conquered this mountain. But to go back to the beginning, even when the bus has dumped the expedition at the end of the road, it's still a long way to base camp. And that means they must employ a lot of porters.
Do these guys understand about being in Bassa tomorrow?
In any one season, there may be up to 30 expeditions in one area. So getting porters can sometimes be difficult. We were lucky, we were one of the first expeditions there in the season, and there were plenty of porters around. We had about 110 miles to walk to the base of the mountain, and it's basically a route up a valley, but it's one of the most rugged valleys in the world. And that 110 miles, in porter terms, was about 12 stages, 12 days of walking.
The whole expedition cost about 40,000 American dollars. That's to send 7 climbers over to Pakistan for about 3 months. Although they tried very hard to get sponsorship, they ended up paying for it all pretty much from their own pockets. A steady escalation of morale is important now as the expedition nears the mountain. Music for the climbers, medical care for the porters.
There's a number of very poor loose teeth. And we're going to take one of them that's almost falling out. You got a picture, Randy?
Yeah.
If the porters get upset for some reason, if you don't give them enough flour or the rivers are too high, they can go on strike. And if that happens, you have a big problem on your hands. You simply can't climb the mountain.
Most of the way up the glacier, there is a path, but occasionally movement of the glacier has wiped that path away, such as at the moment. It's quite treacherous stuff to walk on if you get off the trail. The porters generally know the best way along it, but if you get separated from the porters by spending too much time looking at the view, then you could be in trouble. We're going to spend 5 days walking up the Baltoro to its head, where Gasherbron 4, of course, is situated. This approach up the glacier makes it one of the most difficult walks to any mountain. The rest are amazing.
Pretty impressive sight.
There it is.
You're walking for about 8 days before you actually get a glimpse of the mountain. That's a moment when you feel a little shiver in the pit of your stomach.
When a climber's choosing a mountain to climb, probably the most important thing to him is the shape of the mountain. Symmetry and geometry and just the general beauty of the mountain are important. And Gasherbrum 4 is one of the most beautiful mountains that I've ever seen.
Our base camp was at about 15,000 feet. Very bleak, desolate spot when we first got there, it seemed. Being left by the porters gave us a tremendous feeling of isolation. And that was good, because that's what we'd come for.
When you first get to the foot of a mountain, you're filled with trepidation. It's much, much scarier and intimidating in real life. In fact, to try and contemplate the mountain in one go is just impossible. If you tried to think about going to the summit when you're right at the bottom, then you just pack up and go home, because it's just such a horrendously big thing to be confronted with. And you've got to break the mountain up into small pieces so that you can handle them.
The most practical way for the expedition was actually to place Camp 1 a day's climbing above base camp, place Camp 2 a day's climbing above Camp 1, and Camp 3 at about 7,000 meters or 23,000 feet. Establishing Camp 3 gave them a base from which to climb the final, more difficult part of the mountain in one single push.
One of the hardest things on an expedition can be waiting for bad weather to clear. Your morale can go to the lowest ebbs. At one stage, we were virtually pinned in base camp for 2 weeks.
The 7 individuals have tried to weld themselves into a team. Now, in bad weather, with the porters gone, statistically, they know there's a good chance one or more of them will die on this mountain.
Can't believe how incredibly cold it is, given this trip's to be in the summertime as opposed to the winter. Right now my toes are going numb, just standing here in the tent waiting. Ugh.
With experience in the mountains, it's possible to know when a break in the weather is coming. And it's then you've got to be prepared to give everything you've got to achieving your goal. Speed is the essence. You really must go for it.
There's no doubt that high-altitude climbing is a dangerous business. Last year, nearly 20 climbers died in this area. Most people think that the greatest danger is falling off a mountain. Well, that's not actually true. Those climbers died from avalanche, exposure, pulmonary or cerebral edema, falling into crevasses. If you fall into a crevasse, you can go anything from 20 to hundreds of meters. There was a solo climber on K2, a mountain nearby, who for probably the 20th time was crossing a snow bridge when it collapsed underneath him. He died.
In fact, the snow did hold for this climber, following a well-trodden route on Gasherbrum. But the K2 climber fell over 100 feet into a crevasse when only an hour's walk from his base camp. Then, as well as accidents, there's dehydration.
Dehydration is one of the biggest killers at high altitude. The low pressure extracts water from your lungs and the surface of your skin at a much greater rate than it does at sea level. Also, of course, you're breathing much harder, and those extra breaths also expire a lot of water. When your body loses water, your blood thickens and your circulation is restricted. Therefore, the chance of frostbite is greatly increased. When you're at high altitude, it's essential to drink at least 6 litres a day. And when you have to melt all that from snow, it becomes a very tedious business keeping a camp supplied with water. The problem of dehydration is exacerbated the higher you go, because the conditions up there are more dehydrating. Things start happening to your mind. You begin losing coordination, your perception is clouded, and it gets you in a very dangerous situation.
In the modern style, they're climbing without oxygen-breathing equipment. That saves money and time, but it makes the enterprise far more hazardous and imposes a terrible physical burden in the thin mountain air. That's why so few films have been shot by climbers attempting these enormous mountains.
It's impossible to imagine what it's like until you go there. It's like sprinting 100 metres and perpetually being in that state of oxygen debt.
Establishing Camp 2 at over 20,000 feet. The human body starts to deteriorate at 15,000. Their time is now running out.
We're setting up Camp 2 here. Very small ledge. And we've got to chop out platforms for the tents. And every axe swing is like about 10 axe swings at sea level. You've really got to try and pace yourself, whereas you run right out of breath.
I'm here at Camp 2. It's pretty precarious, pretty spectacular. Those are pluses, and other pluses, this particular tent is pretty warm. The negative side, there's hardly any room here. This tent is incredibly cramped. I mean, it'd be cramped for one person. With 2 people, it's ridiculous. It's like only one person can move in this thing at a time. You can't really sit up comfortably. It's hard to cook. I hope to God I never have to stay in this particular tent again.
The endless argument every climber knows so well. The drive to reach the summit against the unrelenting pain of life at high altitude.
The higher you get, the more severe the mental discipline. Your body just doesn't want to be there. You've really got to push yourself. I suppose that's the attraction in it.
We've just reached the col at about 6,300 metres, or about 21,500 feet, I think. There's a very cold wind blowing. The col's at the bottom of the northwest ridge. Phew. Fantastic view from here. From here we hope to go up about a day's climb to where we will establish Camp 3.
The higher you go, the harder it gets. But simultaneously, the more beautiful your situation becomes, the more spectacular your vista. In a sense, you're entering another world. And the more you push yourself into the extremes, the more those feelings are accentuated. A successful summit climber obviously has ambition, has drive, has mental and physical stamina. which enables them to cope with the severe stresses. Everyone does their best, but in the course of a climb, a selection process happens. You find out that you're either good enough to make it or you're not. And that's a very personal decision. Sometimes everyone gets to the summit, sometimes one person gets to the summit, sometimes no one gets to the summit.
Now I proceed to fall off the ridge. Killed himself prematurely, thus rendering the expedition a complete disaster.
Reading the book of this expedition, I'm left with one haunting quotation. Strange suggestions to travel may be dancing lessons from God, which to me means grasping that fleeting opportunity to come out into the sunlight, whatever the cost, as this expedition does. Camp 3 at 23,000 feet, and still 3,000 feet from the summit.
Very, very cold. Coldest conditions I've ever experienced on a mountain. When we initially dug the snow cave, we had quite a big doorway, and during the first night, the snow cave filled up with spindrift. Everything inside here was covered with a couple of inches of snow. On the second day, I went out and blocked the doorway up with snow blocks. That means I blocked myself out. I had to dig another entrance way in. Very, very hard ice in the snow cave, and it took me several hours to dig my way back in again, but it was worth it because the new contrived doorway, it's a little bit of a dog leg and stops the wind coming in, or the snow coming in at least.
Up here, wounds heal slowly, fingernails grow at half speed. Body fat and weight drop steadily. The higher a climber sleeps and climbs, the more rapid this deterioration becomes. Eventually, this weakening process makes activity on the mountain a case of diminishing returns.
Above Camp 3, we were entering new territory. No one had actually climbed up there before.
Well, Andy, Jeff, Greg, Tom and I left Camp 3 this morning with about 4 days worth of food and fuel and 3 tents, and the weather's absolutely superb. We're hoping it's going to hold until we hopefully get to the summit. At the moment we've struck a rock band and slowed us down somewhat. Hopefully we'll be able to get to the top of it before dark. There's some doubt, however, because higher up it looks like quite difficult climbing. But, well, we're going to have to get to the top of it or stay at the bottom here because there's nowhere to stay in between. What do you reckon, Tom?
Well, hard work. Bloody hard work.
It was a great relief to finally break through the top of the rock barrier and find a good campsite for Camp 4. We were still about 800 metres below the summit, a long way at that altitude.
Here, one climber will turn back, fearing the onset of pulmonary edema, a deadly form of altitude sickness. The remaining 4 climbers will make a daylight dash for the summit. Their packs will contain ropes and climbing equipment, but they will leave behind their food, their tents, and their sleeping bags.
The higher you put yourself, the more out on the limb you become. There's a burning desire to get up higher, whatever the cost. And you've got to be very careful of that.
Well, I've just come up a very steep and slightly frightening 300-metre, 1,000-foot ice and snow slope. But it has meant that we've been able to get up here quite quickly. You can travel much faster on snow and ice than you can on rock. About 25,000 feet now. I'm just waiting for the others to catch up. It looks like, well, the only obstacle ahead is the summit rock barrier, which by the looks of it is quite an obstacle, but I think I can see a ramp going through it. Oh, I'm feeling very, very lethargic. And I think everyone's feeling, once they sit down, like they want to go to sleep. The sun's so warm. It's getting up to an altitude now where you have to force yourself to do anything apart from just nothing.
It took us a long time to climb through the rock barrier. We found ourselves on top of it at sunset. We could look across the summit ridge to the main summit, and although it seemed very close, we knew that it would be at least a 4-hour climb to get there and back again, which was out of the question at that time of day. And so we had a major decision to make. The alternatives were to spend the night where we were and try and survive at nearly 8,000 metres in the open, or to descend back down to where we'd left our sleeping bags. I knew that if I descended, there's no way that I'd be able to make it back up the next day to have another go at the summit. Psychologically, descent then for me would have been defeat.
As the sun went beyond the horizon, we found a suitable bank of snow and began digging a little hole in it with our ice axes. Really tedious work at that altitude, but we had to do it, so we were driven by a very, very deeply seated instinct of survival. After about an hour digging away in the darkness, we finally managed to make a hole which was just big enough for us to be crouched inside. And we crawled in there. We had one pack with us, so we put that in the doorway to seal it off. After a few minutes, you started to get stiff, and you'd sort of try and shift around, but there was no room to shift. You had to stay in exactly the same position because it was really very, very tightly packed in there. We meant it to be like that because the bigger you make the space, then the colder it was going to be. Extremely cold night, coldest night I've ever spent, I think. But we're intact, and well, hopefully we can make it to the summit in the next few hours. Very, very cold. My hands just frozen.
Making the decision to spend the night out without tents at almost 8,000 metres, I was thinking about how that affects not just us, but like our families, my wife and my parents. And it is a selfish decision that you have to make. I guess it just proves that inherently I'm a selfish person that I decided to make that decision.
Our snow cave was on the north summit. We had to traverse across about 200 metres to the main summit, which was slightly higher.
There is a point on these climbs where you think to yourself, well, what did I come here for? I came here to climb this mountain, and the only way to climb a big mountain is really to burn your bridges behind you, because if you have too many links back to the ground, it's too many temptations to give up what you set out to do by burning these bridges, and I think that's the only way that people climb to the tops of big mountains.
The summit, the climax of their dancing lesson with God. Not much dancing for them now, though. Tents and safety are far below, and they're almost too weak for a victory salute.
Well, That's the summit. No more up, thank goodness. A lot of down though, a long, long, long way down. And that, well, of course, occupies everyone's mind when you get to the summit, particularly on a mountain like this. Is probably the most dangerous part of the whole climb is the descent. Well, being to the summit, what does it all mean? Well, I suppose I could say now that I've been to the top of Gasherbrum 4, but it's really the journey there. And even now I'm not that elated because it's very cold wind and I've just spent a night out at almost 26,000 feet without a sleeping bag, so we're all pretty exhausted. And, well, hanging out to get down, really.
For these fellows, that fleeting opportunity to come out into the sunlight is almost over. The grey descent as they begin to come to terms with life after Gasherbrum 4.
For months before successful result of an expedition, you're really, your whole energies are concentrated in one thing. You suffer from a monomania and think of nothing else. So when it's all over, you get this sudden tremendous relief, and you can start thinking about all the rest of the things in your life.
As one of my heroes, the climber Don Willens, once said, "The mountains will always be there. The trick is for you to be there as well." To give you an idea of the odds, that season, 80 climbers from 9 nations set out to climb nearby K2. 27 reached the summit, 13 died. And now to our third film. Well, it's back down almost to sea level, to a particular tribe of North American Indians, the Mohawks. They've a great head for heights and no fear at all, and so they've virtually cornered a very particular profession.
If I'm going to die, the last place I'd like to die is on a job, because I'd hate to fall 20 floors, because you know you ain't coming out of it. Just imagine when you hear of an accident happening where a man falls and gets killed. I can almost say, oh my God, what is that man thinking of at that time? And as people say, oh, it's so fast you don't notice. I think if you're coming down 20 floors, you will notice a lot of things. If I thought I was going to die every day, I'm in the wrong business.
The man beneath the hard hat is George Gilbert, a Mohawk Indian. 300 years ago, he would have been a warrior. 100 years ago, a logger or river pilot. Today, he works at another dangerous trade. It's called high steel.
Our tradition, the Indians were warriors. We've always done things that were exceptionally difficult, and we were never afraid of it.
We got a brace, boy.
And now, well, the wars are over, and the war now is work, so we go to work.
George is a connector, one of 2 in each gang. Every working day, he climbs sheer columns, and with a single bolt creates a structure where before there was only sky. Mohawks have been working in high steel for nearly a century. In New York, they helped erect the United Nations building, the Chrysler building, and the Empire State.
I mean, a lot of people say, well, anybody can do it. It's a hard job.
Hey, tie it up, don't lose it, now pull it.
You're thinking all the time, you're alert. It's like a puzzle.
A gang of 8 men creates the skyscraper's skeleton, a giant 3-dimensional puzzle. Each beam is numbered and carefully laid out. If a beam is misplaced, the structure must be dismantled and the error corrected.
Go right around, now. Put that in, come out.
The heaviest steel goes up first. Columns like this will carry the whole weight of the building. If a cable slips, a column can crash through floor after floor, crushing the men below. The derrick that moves the steel weighs 20 tons. A single man will turn it to direct a beam into place, a mass of more than 30 tons in motion. It takes a special kind of teamwork to fit all the pieces together. The Mohawk language binds these men together as firmly as the steel beams they set into the skyline. Speaking Mohawk is being Mohawk.
You find yourself using less and less Mohawk all the time. Only when you're with certain people, like we have a certain bunch of guys that sit together and have a few beers, and all of a sudden nobody's talking English anymore. Everybody's talking more.
One guy says, are you really an Indian? I says, yeah, I'm an Indian, Mohawk Indian. Then he says, you know, can you speak your language? I says, yes, and I'm proud of it. And to me, once we lose our language totally, we lose our heritage.
Mohawks have always been considered a breed apart, a special kind of steelworker. Years ago, an official of the Dominion Bridge Company marveled at their apparent fearlessness. They would climb up into the spans, he wrote, and walk around up there as cool and collected as the toughest of our riveters. This happens to be the most dangerous work in all construction. Men who want to do it are rare, and men who can do it are even more rare.
Coming down. Come in tomorrow morning.
Friday afternoon, payday. George Gilbert and his friends will head for home. The round trip spans 2 countries, 2 cultures, 2 ways of life. As members of the Iroquois Confederacy, a union of 6 Indian nations, some Mohawks carry an Iroquois passport. To them, it's more than a document. It's a symbol of their independent heritage. Home is the little town of Gahnawague on the outskirts of Montreal. For the Mohawk, it is the center of his life. The weekend is a quiet time to visit friends, time to be part of the Mohawk family. For George Gilbert, the traditional Mohawk breakfast, steak and cornbread, is part of the Sunday ritual.
I know.
Nawadigi. Oyunsa. Ogara. Onunkish.
It is also time for elders to pass along the Mohawk language to the young.
Otanagi. Onawira. Onawira. Oh, Nati.
This cemetery is a reminder of the risks the Mohawks live with on the job. The gate commemorates the Quebec Bridge disaster of 1907. 33 Indians were killed when the span they were building collapsed beneath them. Steel crosses mark their graves. Other deaths would follow, but accepting danger is part of what it means to be Mohawk. Climbing that first high tower and striding across an open beam is a rite of passage into a select fellowship. Son follows father and grandfather into the air. Watching them, it's easy to understand how the myth has arisen that Mohawks are somehow genetically unafraid of heights. But George Gilbert and his friends disagree. Steel workers feel as much fear as the next man. A Mohawk uses his fear to stay alert and alive.
I'm at home when I'm at work. You believe in yourself. So I ain't gonna die today. Why should I die today?
Erecting a skyscraper is a monumental defiance of gravity. In this interplay of man and machine, the Mohawk crews are specialists, the high wire act of their industry. Contractors call upon them for the tough jobs, the most dangerous work when deadlines threaten and work is under pressure.
They have a lot of good men here, and we always have this little competition. They make us try harder, and they try harder, and if you're going up, he's got to keep up with you. Actually, if he passes you, then you have to catch up to him. It's the competition that makes you go. And I think it really helps the trade get a lot better and strong. It produces a better quality of men.
Before the last piece of steel is set, there is a ceremony, topping out. It's part of a tradition all steel workers share.
When you're talking about ironwork, you're talking about a lot of men, Indian or non-Indian. You can't say we really do it for the money, it's for the pride. It's the years and years, the generations of men that have gone ahead of us that worked in this business. You want to be one of them.
As I said, they've certainly got a corner of that high riggers trade. Well, there you are, even if you're not a climber. I do hope you've enjoyed the variety of tonight's Wide World. Good night.
Top camp, Camp 6, in the Hornbeam Couloir. But first, they had to tackle the West Ridge.
The West Ridge is long. It's 1.5 miles. In fact, it's almost 2 mountains. You climb 4,500 feet, and then you've got 1.5 miles, which is not flat like people say it is. It's a 1,000-foot climb along that 1.5 miles, and the line of communication becomes extremely long and drawn out. Well, our Miller's group, in the end, got away at about 12 o'clock today, which is really very late indeed. But on their behalf, I must say, they had their first night on oxygen last night. And there was quite a bit of confusion about fixing up the regulators and the different types of mask for sleeping. So, all in all, with the oxygen and the need to sort out the loads, and the fact that it was a very cold wind indeed, I think that we can give them the benefit of any doubt about a late start. And as you can see behind you at the moment, on the ridge, they're moving quite well, and I have every confidence that they'll get to Camp 5 tonight.
It's very hard work. 75,000 feet. I used to do this sort of thing on the beach as a kid. It's a bit different now.
At 25,000 feet, Al's group had been on oxygen for the carry, but not for clearing the entrance to the Camp 5 snow hole. Doing the same journey along the West Ridge towards Camp 5, the Sherpas reckon to do without bottled oxygen. They just carry it, 36 pounds each load.
Namaste. Kastacha. Shabash. Very hungry. 4 bottles. Yeah. Very good, very good.
Having dumped their loads of oxygen, the Sherpas would turn round and walk all the way back again. The last group to make the 4 to 5 hour trip to Camp 5 is the summit team. This is Dave Maxwell. He does have the benefit of oxygen, and it helps, but only so much.
Hello, base camp. This is Camp 2. Radio check, over.
Base, okay, over.
Hello, Henry. We've had, first of all, a resume on progress. Everybody seemed to get over to Camp 5 as far as we could see without any problem, and certainly the Sherpas are well back along the ridge towards Camp 4. The lift of orange oxygen from 3 to 4 seems to have gone all right, except for one. I think Skoudas has blown up and appears to be coming down back to here, and I'll send him down to 1 to relieve Duncan Strutt, who I think is quite keen to come up and have another go. Over.
Roger, over.
Laurie Skoudas had always struck me as one of the strongest on the expedition. He was certainly the biggest. His hands would dwarf even a Yeti's. In Scotland, he runs the mountain training school near Ben Nevis. But Ben Nevis is not Everest.
Totally and utterly knackered. Walked today and was so keen on getting to 4. Got up towards Jap 3. I've just no legs, no heart, no lungs. I am just spent. I mean, really, just nothing. I so wanted to get there. My body would not let me get there at all. Yeah. And Andy he took a bottle off me and said, look, for goodness sake, go to Jap 3 and get some smashing pictures. There was no way I was going up there. I mean, I was empty bag on good snow. Just no way. Oh, I just switched off. Oh, I'm just like psychologically defeated, full stop, and hacked off.
A mile above the deflated lorry, Dave Nichols and his team at Camp 5 can't quite settle on which champagne to have with the caviar.
So we've got noodles, some American steak that Max found.
Yeah, they're only 6 years old. They should be all right.
6 years old American steak.
In the freezer.
Are we going to have a Bernard Matthews dinner tonight, or are we giving those away?
I think we've given ours away anyway.
What about tomorrow? Confident?
Piece of piss.
Piece of piss, eh?
You know, this oxygen, it's like been roll bagging.
So what part are you going to play? How's it going to go tomorrow? How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I'm waiting for you and Max to go all the way to the top and fix the ropes, and me and Terry will just follow in behind quite easily.
So the plan is that Max and I and Tug and possibly DT leave tomorrow morning at 8 ahead of the others with some fixed rope and some oxygen. Get to Camp 6 and leave our gear there, and then go on up the couloir and try and fix the tricky rock bit in the afternoon sunshine. If we do that, we'll have it cracked for the following morning. And they'll be able to start out for the main summit bid on the Friday the 29th, with the knowledge that that rope is there to see them over the difficult bit, and then they'll go whizzing up to the top. And they've got a radio, and we will be on listening watch down here, and I don't think we'll actually see them wave from the top, but at least we'll get the word when they're there, and we hope we can pass it out live.
Confidence at Camp 2, confidence up at Camp 5. Over the next 2 days, the 4 summiteers will be following this route. In terms of sheer vertical distance, it's less than a mile to the top, but it is the highest mile in the world. More than a mile above expedition leader Dougie Keelan at Camp 2, Dave Nichols and his team are 2 days' climb away from the summit. Today, they must get from Camp 5 to the Hornbeam Couloir and establish Camp 6, their launch pad for the top. But the first hurdle for the summiteers is the diagonal ditch. Over to Dave Maxwell.
Diagonal ditch as it looks from Camp 5. Looks fairly steep, but last night, when the sun got on it, it seemed to lay back a bit. We're now about 10 minutes away from leaving. We'll be moving up the diagonal ditch. Dave and I are moving up ahead just to try and get some fixed roads up the couloir ready for tomorrow.
We started very early in the morning and we had our brews, which takes a long time to brew up and get going. It was -40 that day at Camp 5. And we were actually hoped to leave at 8, and we left at 8:30ish. Only to discover that we'd walked 50 yards, and my oxygen system wasn't working.
What's the problem?
Dave's safety arm valve screwed up. It's not working. He had to come down and get a constant flow. Trying things. Probably frozen up or something.
Yeah. Pissed off, Dave.
Slept in the bag all last night, so it's unlikely. We fiddled about with the thing and tried to get it going, and it wouldn't work, and so I then had to get another option. So the end result was we didn't start till 10:30.
This is the actual top of the steep bit of the diagonal ditch. Made famous by the Americans in 1963. We hadn't planned to fix any ropes on this part of the route, but as you can see, there are old expedition ropes on the route already. As we suspected, it wasn't quite as steep as we thought, and therefore not too bad. The only thing that makes it a little bit awkward is the actual lack of snow on the scree. There's a small gully to cross on a bit of frayed rope, and there you see Dave Nichols out in front, and he's on to the less steep part of the diagonal ditch, and there you see he's trying to sort out some of the ropes so that the support group can make use of them.
Al Miller's support party, carrying the equipment for Camp 6, eventually caught up with Dave Nichols, painfully breaking the trail. Everyone else watched, waited, and in our case, filmed, from the top of the west shoulder and from Camp 2 at the foot of Everest, where Dougie was keeping his vigil. From here, the mountain is deceptive. The slope looks quite different from base camp, 12 miles down the valley. As the hours passed, it was becoming increasingly obvious that the chances of putting in Camp 6 as high as was intended were getting slimmer and slimmer.
I noticed there was a discussion going on behind me with Al, who was leading the support group, Al Miller, who's leading the support group. And I started to twig that actually we weren't going to make it. And then Al shouted up to me and said, look, you've got people running out of oxygen, you've got somebody with loss of a crampon. It then became evident to me, I said, that we weren't going to make it. So I said, well, look, there's a rock up here. Come up to the rock and we'll have a discussion up at the rock. And then it naturally happened that when we were at the rock, we all, I think at the same moment, twigged that we weren't going to make it up the couloir. So I said, OK, well, leave your kit here. I then opened up the radio to talk to Dougie.
Well, we're at 7-8. We're putting up 2 limpets, and we're going to spend the night here. And we could have a go tomorrow, though of course we've got that extra distance to do, over.
Yeah, 7-8, I mean, it's actually, in my view, it's too far. Well, David, you know, it's a pity. How will the support group going, over?
Some of them not as well as others. Some of them quite well, over.
Roger, OK. Out to you. Hello 5, over.
Hello 2, this is 5, over.
Roger. How is your group going, over?
5, we're just sitting here. We rather resent the implication that we haven't been going well today and that we haven't carried what we were asked to carry. And say that the support group wasn't going well, I think is a bit unfair. Roger so far, over.
I'm going to interrupt, Al, and say that there's no imputation of any sort on you or any of your group. We're just trying to find a way ahead, over.
Inevitably, we were all disappointed. We were all under a certain amount of pressure, and at times we felt that we were supporting the supporting group rather than they were supporting us, and we were doing too much for them. I mean, you know, when you're under pressure up on the high mountain up there, it's inevitably there are these slight frictions there.
Frictions are soon forgotten. Far more important, the mountain still stands to be conquered.
Henry, you heard all of that. I think we can make no decision about Dave going on until we see how they get on tomorrow. And
Down at Camp 2 in a freezing blizzard, Dougie faces an agonizing choice: to continue with the summit bid tomorrow or to call it off tonight. He has stood here getting advice and entreaties from camps both above and below for almost an hour. And it was quite incredibly cold once the sun had gone down.
Roger. OK, Henry, fine. I'm freezing my balls off out here without any gloves, and I'm going to go back in.
I could stand it no longer, and Dougie soon followed me in. At 8 o'clock, he got back on the radio to Dave Nichols. Dave made a long and impassioned plea for a go at the summit tomorrow. If they failed, at least they would have seen the conditions in the Hornbeam couloir.
David, I'm coming to the view that we must give you the benefit of the doubt. I think your chances of getting to the top tomorrow are remote, but there is great advantage in having, if only, a close recce of the couloir.
Dougie, well, I'm delighted. Many thanks, sir.
However, I'm going to insist on one or two things. You must have your radio, and I want a midday schedule, and I want, I'm going to insist that you turn back at a reasonable hour. We don't want any more strange bodies up there for perpetuity. Do you understand, over?
6 indeed, over.
Lying in your sleeping bag at night, you know, contemplating 1,000 metres of ascent on unknown terrain, you know, it's quite a daunting feeling, you know. But we still felt at that stage that we were in with a shot, you know, even a very slim one.
Oxygen and food supplies are limited. Dave Nichols and his team have today and only today to make the summit, over 3,000 feet above them. They know, too, they face the extra 1,000 feet they should have covered yesterday. And in the Hornbeam couloir, conditions are against them.
Started at 5 in the morning brewing and getting ourselves ready to leave at 8. And, OK, left shortly just shortly before 9, actually. And then started climbing up the couloir and agreed a schedule with Dougie at 12. And on that schedule at 12, we'd only reached the constriction in the Hornbeam, which is, I suppose, about a third of the way up. And it was quite evident that we weren't going to make the top that particular day and get back again.
It's been very hard going, as you probably gathered, coming up the Hornbeam up here. We just fixed some rope over quite a difficult bit. Indeed, it was rather like a Scottish gully, with spindrift blowing down it for about an hour. Well, maybe half an hour. But we got through that and affixed a rope there. We're obviously not going to make the summit, so we need to make a a decision which is as generous as it possibly can be for the second summit team coming up. Over.
David, yes, I think that's entirely right reasoning, Over. Well, I'm very disappointed, obviously, because this was our first carefully planned summit bid, which is going to fail. But, you know, you pick up the pieces and you make the best. You pick up what's good from what's been achieved from this and throw that back into the second bid, which is what we're going to do. Yeah, I'm disappointed, I won't deny that. And I'm sure they are too, with a chance of a lifetime to be selected for the first summit bid on a major Everest expedition. But it isn't going to happen for them.
The reasons we didn't get to the top were outside our control. In terms of climbing ability, in terms of physical ability to get there, we all had it. That's what's so frustrating. I mean, that's why I felt so inwardly depressed and bitter after we had to come back down again. When I spoke to Dougie on the radio, and he said, well, that's it. It was like a knife just going sort of sliding straight into me, because, you know, we were there, we were fit, we were able to go there. The weather was good. But the factors that determined that we couldn't go there were, as I say, outside our control. And those I think I've described already, is that, you know, the plan was too ambitious for the conditions, and we put too much on the summit team. There was too much responsibility in terms of leading the route and trying to establish the camp and all the other bits and pieces.
Limited resources had ruled out a second day. Now, 25,000 feet up, Dave Maxwell arrives back at Camp 5.
Oh, mate.
I didn't get one chance. We blew it right out the window.
Don't worry about it. You did a good job. I mean, the very fact that it took bloody 5-6 hours to get to the campsite shows it needed another camping, didn't it? How you feeling? It's a ball buster, that one back, isn't it?
It's become clear that they were exhausted after the heavy carry, which didn't get as far as we'd hoped to locate that top camp. And therefore, we must have a concerted and separate effort to get the top camp fixed firmly before we put the summit bidders, the summit climbers, into the camp for them to go to the top the next day. That's the conclusion I draw from this.
I see Dougie's going to change his tactics for the next lot.
I haven't heard anything on the radio.
He spoke to me, you know, when we were having our little chat.
Yeah.
He said, well, we're going to have to get some Camp 6 fully stocked before we send up the summit team.
Yeah.
And my reply was, lucky them.
Right.
Yeah, we were very, very disappointed.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
you know.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, heartbroken, really.
It's au revoir to Camp 5 or bye-bye? Maybe bye-bye.
Very pretty with all the big stuff.
Al Miller could afford to admire the scenery. He hadn't just turned back from the summit. Alone or in small groups, everyone made their way down the ropes. The first to reach Camp 2 was Terry Moore, close to tears with frustration.
You won't believe the support that you've had throughout the expedition. Oh. Well done. Thanks, Dougie. Bloody good effort. Everybody, every single one of us has been right behind you all the way. And we feel so sorry for in so many ways, and so grateful for your terrific efforts. Very good effort, old hand. Can we have a wet? Can we have a wet for Terry?
Something's going on.
Oh, I put the frostbite on my feet yesterday. Now I've got trench foot, I think.
Do your feet need looking at?
Just my morale.
David and co, welcome back.
Well, we failed, didn't we?
Well, wasn't through want of trying.
We've got to get up there.
Wasn't through want of trying.
No.
Wasn't through want of trying at all. And all I'd say to you, old hand, don't be discouraged. Nobody in this world could have done more than all of you did. And,
that's good.
yeah. Well, you must be disappointed. Of course you are. You wouldn't be fair or human if that wasn't so. And one would think that
I spent 2 days fuming bitterly. And I must say that's all over now. So, you know, we can sort of talk dispassionately about the whole thing and, and so on. But,
well, I mean,
it's inevitable.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's a team effort, this.
Indeed.
We're part of a big team.
Without a doubt, it'd been fantastic to get to the top, but as long as somebody does it. I mean, everybody says as long as somebody gets there, but I know in the back of my mind I would love to get to the top.
I didn't have
You came all the way down the Coolmore, and it cost all the way back to oxygen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How was that?
Desperate. It is. It really is.
Even though you come down here,
it's
it's
hard,
so desperate.
yeah. I mean, you can't even free feel. It really is,
Was that all pretty stable, the snow?
No.
No, especially at the bottom.
At the bottom of the couloir, you go... But a big hole. It's the worst bit of the whole couloir. I hated that.
What's that, wind slab?
Oh, yeah, it's hollow. Hollow. I mean, the whole right across the bottom of the couloir. And once we were in there, after about an hour or so going up there, we knew we'd never make it from there. Take far too long. Well, you would get to the top, but I mean, you're just committing suicide, really.
So, Henry, is this the demon spirit that's been behind the failure of the first bid?
No, according to this computer, they got on the top 2 days ago. But it can only show the logistics and the arithmetic of the thing and make sure that you don't finish up with too many people in one camp, for example, which is one thing that showed up quite clearly. And the other thing was yesterday, we were doing a hand-crank version, and it was different from what it said on the computer, and when I checked it out, it was the computer that was right. So, I mean, I think at these altitudes, you do make silly arithmetical mistakes, and this doesn't.
The other big question is that of oxygen. Is that also on the computer?
The use of the cylinders is, and its consumption, and where you need the cylinders and how much they weigh and who's going to carry them, all of that is here. But of course, what you can't allow for is somebody who uses more than his ration. I mean, has a nice 10-hour sleep instead of 8, which we've allowed for, or he turns his regulator up faster. If he's just got one bottle and that's for the day, well, he's the loser if he runs out quicker.
We were inexperienced with the quantities of oxygen that we were carrying and how much we should use, whether we should use 2 litres a minute, 1 litre a minute, and how we should actually use all that.
Well, they seem to have run out quicker than I would have expected, put it that way. And they've learned, but sadly, whether they get another chance to put that learning into use is we'll see.
For Dave Maxwell, a heavy heart is further burdened by the implications of frozen feet.
I mean, I would, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a sort of an 8, which is that's a nasty superficial frostbite. You can see you've definitely got blistering there, and there's obviously blistering appearing here. You've got the sort of dusky blue.
Yeah.
That's a red herring, but I mean, you may well lose your nails later anyway. For you, the game is over. This one, anyway.
But for the expedition as a whole, it was far from over. Dougie had already named the team for a second attempt. A strong contender had been Simon Lowe, the SATCOM man. He had consistently carried loads faster than anyone and was still going like a train.
You're okay, Simon. You're looking pale. You all right?
Yeah, I've had a few shocks over the last few days.
I know what you're going to ask me.
Oh, Brexit. Yeah. Why are you looking so pale? What did you say?
What did I say? What was my answer to that? I said I had a few shocks in the last few days.
Which were?
Well, not getting in the second summit team.
You really thought there was a good chance?
Well, didn't you at one stage? It was announced that there were 7 contenders for those 6 places. And about 2 days later, they announced the 6. And Richard Pelly got a place on the grounds of you know, the very good work he's done above Camp 4 and up to 5. Suddenly, I didn't even get a look in. So, yeah, I'm a bit pissed off.
Simon wasn't the only one. But with at least 12 strong men competing for 6 places on the second summit team, disappointment was inevitable. After a spell of heavy snow and biting wind, the sun shone again on Everest. It shone too on the massive Japanese, Chinese, Nepalese expedition, some 300 climbers strong. They had been sharing the mountain with our expedition, but using a different route. On Thursday, May the 5th, our second summit team, led by Merv Middleton, watched their first team make it to the top.
3 tents, 3 orange dome tents. The wind is screaming. One of the tents is inverting all the time. In the wind. 4 days and we'll be in the same excitement as they are, no doubt. I'm absolutely delighted, I must say, for them and indeed for us, because, as I was saying, it does mean that the snow conditions and the wind and so on are tolerable.
It looks pretty mean up there.
When you think that they've been planning for 2-3 months now, they stated a date, and then a week ago they stated a time. And then to the minute the guy stands on the top, I mean, that's a good performance. And in those conditions as well, because it's not easy.
Just wish it wasn't going to take 4 days to get there. Beam us up to Camp 5, Scotty.
That's called cheating. It's terribly deceptive, isn't it? It really does look like you almost reach out and touch it, and there it is 2 miles away.
Yeah, you start walking towards it, you're in for a bit of a shock.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a fillip, isn't it, actually, to see that. It's a boost. It's a boost. Yeah.
Down at Camp 1, you talked about it being an ego trip. Do you still see it like that?
Well, it has to be. I mean, there's no reason why anyone the slightest should go from 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, 4, 5, 6 camps, getting progressively colder and tireder and hungrier and exposing yourself to more and more danger. I don't know why we do it. That's why I wear this stupid hat. But, you know, we owe it now to the guys. I mean, there's been 36 guys and 6 pretty strong Sherpas, and they've all been pushing, and we're the culmination of 2.5 months of effort. So the least we can do is do the thing justice. I pray for a windless day, sunshine, and an oxygen system that works, and a body that's willing.
3 days later, between camps 5 and 6, Merv's body may still have been willing, but little else was going well for him and his partner, Steve Bell.
Yeah, Dougie, we're flandering around on huge slabs again, pretty knee-deep. All right, pain in the arse. We'll make you in about 10 yards every 20-odd minutes. I'm hitting on heads on a bloody brick wall up here.
Should we tell him to come back? OK, Merv, I think you're nudging towards a decision to come back, having dumped the oxygen that you've got. So be it, Merv. There were wet slurries coming out the Hornby and Kurwa, sweeping down the face of the Japanese direct. And the summit snowfield, which is another 2,000 feet above us now, was actually collapsing and falling through the Hornby and Kurwa, which is a natural funnel on the mountain. And it's exploding out over the middle snowfield. And virtually every area where we had traversed had been swept. That in some way pleased me. It vindicated the decision when we should have left the mountain. In fact, you could argue that we should have left the mountain 2 hours earlier. And old JC gave us the benefit of the doubt of 2 hours. 2 hours grace, I think, because some of the sizes of the slab avalanches that poured off there hours later, a few days later, JC was smiling. Well, there it is. There it is. That's the second one we've tried. Everybody's given their best. But we've been beaten this time by very unstable snow conditions, and it's better to have everybody in one piece than and a disappointment than to not cut them all back in again.
Is that the end, Dougie, do you think?
No, I think we'll work out ways of trying to do another regain on this. You can only do your best.
You've got 2 Italians here waiting.
I know. Chaps on the sideline who want a second crack at it, and who I hope will get it. Right, well, the decision's made. We've aborted this one, and we will make another plan.
So far, it's Everest 2, Expedition 0. Everything now hangs on what would be the third and final attempt.